Welcome to Magic.ai, the operating system for hospitality. At Magic, we know an operating system is more than just software and systems. It's about people, because hospitality is nothing without them. So supporting the hospitality community is our number one goal.
I think there needs to be more of a support system. Like, you have to love this business and you have to love every aspect of it, including sharing tribal knowledge on what is successful and also tribal knowledge of what is a failure.
Founded by lifelong experts, we're building the place where everyone in hospitality, from seasoned pros to first-timers, can gather, share, and grow together. Plus, we're crafting scalable tools and AI-supported software to boost your business. Dive into our vibrant community platform packed with meaningful conversations and robust tools and templates designed just for you. Need more? Our custom software solutions have got you covered. From recruiting and staffing to digital playbooks and dashboards, we're working on building a unique hub of resources unlike any other. Magic is your single point of origin for important conversations, accessible tools, valuable insights, and more. Join us at magic.ai. The evolution of hospitality is here.
I think that's the hardest part of farming. It's not growing. It's actually getting it to market, and it's timing and it's communication with chefs. So much of what we just throw away
is usable.
It's so usable. Yes, it's $30 for that chicken, but if you can use it 5 ways, yes, there's so much more there. And it does take more knowledge, and it might take the tiniest bit more effort.
Breana Killeen is a food writer, recipe developer, culinary nutritionist, and farmer with almost 16 years of experience creating editorial and digital food content. She has written and edited over 2,500 recipes, articles, and presentations for top brands. Breana has a master's degree in public health, is a graduate of Le Cordon Bleu, and is a registered dietitian. When she's not cooking or chasing toddlers, you can find her out on Killeen Crossroads Farm in Vermont, wrangling 175 chickens, 9 cows, 2 dogs, and oh yeah, her tractor-loving husband.
If you are Chinese, how do you write a Mexican recipe without being an asshole? And the biggest thing I tell people all the time is you do your homework. If you can focus in on the ingredients and or potentially the technique used, instead of saying Asian short ribs, say soy sauce and ginger braised ribs. That gives cultural context without you just having to rely on whatever the name is or a stereotype or anything. You know, I started in restaurants. I started in kitchens at 19 because my friends were waiting tables, and I was like, that sounds fun, but what's happening in that kitchen? And
that smells good.
Yeah. And, you know, who are those guys? And I was always the only woman. I didn't smoke, so I never got a break. And I loved the rush of it, and I still do. I don't sit still well. And I think that's something that people in the industry, we all can kind of say, it just is how it is. I was at the bagel place the other day. I'm standing in line and they're so busy, that line's out the door. I get around the corner and there are 2 boxes of yogurts that are sitting out I've watched, the whole time. And so I stand there and I started loading the case. Wow. I did. And I could see them behind the counter and I'm just doing it. I'm like, and people are looking at me and then I
got you.
And I put them away and she's like, do you work here? And I was like, no, but they were busy and I knew where they were going. And
totally.
And it just like, we're all just standing here.
I'm the same person. Like if I'm in a restaurant and there's a guest that's dining and like they knock their coat off the back of their chair, I'm like, I got you, don't worry, or like whatever the thing is. Like, can we get another napkin over here? Like,
yeah. Like you just, it's all part of it. And I think my role, at Food and Wine is really, it started, you'll do digital recipes and we just really need you to help with these 25. And now I'm constantly looking at, how is this successful for them at home? And, I worked in the test kitchen at EatingWell for 10 years and it was always, people don't have high-end professional stoves in their homes. They have GEs and Frigidaires and they have coils, and medium low on electric is basically like off. So, how do we give people visual indicators? And not just rely on time, and how do we not use the word saute and just say stir?
Yeah. I feel like you and
so-
Carolyn have a lot in common.
Yeah.
We do. Yeah. So I was reading through your bio and I thought, dang, is this me in Vermont? I can't believe we haven't crossed paths. We've both been in food media for a long time. I was at America's Test Kitchen for 9 years, and we both went to Le Cordon Bleu, though I was in Paris and you were in London, and we both have toddlers, which is crazy. So even though I'd love to sit and talk with you. I mean, like just us about the current landscape of food media, but I think it might be more beneficial to our listeners to talk a little bit about farming practices and health and wellness and sustainability of small farms, if that's okay.
Yeah. Of course.
So your family has a small regenerative farm in Vermont. Can you explain what that is and how it differs from a conventional or even organic farm?
Absolutely. And those words don't, regenerative agriculture in some ways has a basis for certain practices, but you can't say it's 100% in one way, kind of like using the word natural. Like, what does natural actually mean? And so, living in Vermont where it's always the umpteenth degree, what we do on the farm is kind of, the pinnacle of what you would want to do on a regenerative farm. Essentially, what that means is we have 20 acres and we raise essentially a closed system that supports itself. So we actually had a baby cow yesterday, 2 days ago. So talk about, toddlers, they like jump around like toddlers, and they're about the size of actually a medium-sized dog. They're about 50 pounds when they come out. And so we have 10 cows at the moment, and we're down to about 75 chickens because we're moving things around. But the area that the cows are in is a very wet area and really only can be used for animal grazing, unless maybe we wanted to grow like cranberries or rice, like something that's like very, very wet. And then we have the chickens, and we both do layers and meat birds. And then we have about 2 acres of vegetables, which is up on the hillside, which is well drained. We have both greenhouses so we can extend our season, and then open air growing. And the whole concept being that we grow a little bit of a lot of things versus monocropping and focusing on one thing. And it's rotationally grazing the animals. It's rotationally moving our vegetables. And we create our own compost from those animals that we then use on the beds, and vice versa. Any vegetables that we have or plants, or honestly, our meat birds after they're slaughtered, come in and clean up after. Everything is this closed loop where, as much as we possibly can, we produce all the inputs into our soil, and any output, like vegetables that don't sell or things that can be fed then to those animals.
Yep. And although this next question that I have for you is, I love asking questions that I know the answers to. But for our audience, can you talk a little bit about how you get your farm's food out into the public? CSAs, farmers markets, teaming up with local restaurants, like what is working right now?
So I would say, I think that's the hardest part of farming is it's not growing. It's actually getting it to market, and it's timing, and it's communication with chefs. And we run a farm stand, which is an honor system farm stand. So people actually can
Welcome to Vermont.
Welcome to Vermont. And we do cash, check, or Venmo. And I'll admit we get all three. We can run a card if needed. And then we do wholesale. We have learned that because we are a small farm and people think, 20 acres, that's a lot of land. We're actually only growing on 2 acres, which is a very small amount. And especially to be producing things that, restaurants want consistently. So we send out a wholesale list, and we have kind of narrowed it down to their very specific restaurants that want our stuff. And it's the type of restaurants that are looking for not your everyday stuff. We're not selling carrots and onions. We're selling tiara cabbage and Jimmy Nardello's and the type of produce that not everybody else is doing. Habanadas, not just habanero. And we have found that there's this really interesting balance of chefs do not email. We send things all out on text. And then we bother them incessantly to get their orders in on time. We are shameless and they are shameless back. And even better is in the fall right now is when I contact all my chefs and I say, hey, what do you want for next year? And then we start there and work backwards.
Yeah. And the best case scenario is some of these relationships that you have with chefs. Like I know one in particular who comes to mind, Frank Pace, who is awesome and is just a Vermont institution. I've had the pleasure of working with him. And he has the mindset like I used to when I had my kitchens, which is like, oh, there's something cool. I'm going to take all of it. Like, can I get all of that?
Yes. And what's even better, and so we do Cornish hens and, Whistlepig put in the whiskey distiller. They have a house and they asked for 500 for the next year. Because
oh my gosh,
500 Cornish hens.
Cornish hens, which
500 Cornish hens.
We are the only people that are producing local Cornish hens. I know it's so like old school 90s. People
so dope though.
They're awesome. They're a quick grower. They only need 4 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
They're quick to prepare. You still get like 8 or 9 ounces off of a bird.
And they like to kind of like rabble around in the stuff, right? Like they forage a little bit and do their thing.
They get out and they feather out, and we only do them during the summer. So if somebody has access to a freezer, we could say, hey, we'll package them however you want. Sometimes people want them in 2 packs, 4 packs, whatever. And it makes it, or they just want singles because they're like, hey, we're just entertaining 2 people tonight. They defrost them, in a couple days. And it's a super fun little way that, you can get something fun out. So that relationship, as much as we can prepare for things, we do. And we also succession plant. So last year, every chef wanted Jimmy Nardello's. It was like Jimmy Nardello's, Jimmy Nardello's, Jimmy Nardello's. So we succession planted Jimmy Nardello's to be available from July to the first week of August. I'm sorry, of October. And that's how we use the outdoor area and the greenhouses. And so
it's sort of an interplay between you and the chefs and having conversations about what you have available, what you can grow at that time of year, what they want, and sort of a back and forth. And that's how you do your planning.
That's how we do our planning. And we have certain chefs that will say, what do you have extra right now? We'll take it. And then they, and I'll say, hey, we have a ton of, this, I like to grow a lot of specialty things that don't sell. And just to see if we can do it. But, it took us 3 years to figure out how to grow gochujang peppers. So the Korean peppers, because I wanted to dry them in order to make house-made kimchi. And we just couldn't find, the beds are different, right? You just know, it's just like your oven, your hot spots. We have some beds that only want to grow peppers, and we can't grow a broccoli or cauliflower or anything cruciferous in our soil. So those types of things, I got to the end of summer, nobody was buying them. And so finally somebody was like, hey, I'll take them. We'll make some hot sauce from them. And, we give it to you at a price that is basically paying for our packaging.
Yep.
But it's like, please take these. And so that balance of being able to be a little bit flexible is super, super helpful because, just like restaurants, our margins are so small, and our business depends on the weather. So it's really tough. And as much as we try to mitigate that, being able to have some flexibility really, really helps.
And not just weather, like small farms have it tough, period. Right. And there's just not always enough money coming in from selling food to keep things going. So a lot of folks have to pick up off-farm gigs, which, I know you have more than one. What do you think needs to change to make farming more sustainable for families like yours?
That's a great question. I think there's a lot of things that I could say to go into that. I think that as much as we preach this, we also know that it's hard, but paying for what food actually costs.
Yeah, 100%.
Um,
Educating the consumer on that.
We've had a lot of really good discussions with chefs and restaurateurs about educating the public on the value of food rather than cheap food and what that really means.
Exactly. And, it's hard a lot of times when we say we can't raise a chicken, full-size bird, for less than $16. $1.50 for the chick itself. It's $4 just to process it, and then it's 8 weeks of feed.
Mm-hmm.
That's not including labor.
Yep.
So in order for us to actually make any kind of profit on it, our birds, our raw birds for the consumer cost anywhere from $28 to $32 for a 4.5 to 5 pound bird.
Yep.
And the people who come into the farm stand know that they pay it. We do have chefs that are like, I can't pay that. And I'm like, I totally get that. I really, really do. We can discount it, but if you can do this volume and guarantee it and do it for a special dinner or something, that helps us. And we know we can't be your chicken farmer. We just can't. We can't produce enough to make that work. But if occasionally you can buy from us and help to educate the consumer of why a $5 chicken, fully cooked chicken from Costco, what that means.
Yeah. Well, Killeen Crossroads Farm is in a really interesting space in that, like, you grow, you have the farm stand and you do that, you connect with local restaurants.
Yeah.
You're talking about doing something more with the farm, which I don't know how much you want to talk about or not, but that's fine.
Yeah.
But I think, like, you as a chef, like, it's interesting to me because, like, you guys have the farm, you're also a chef. So there's an element of, like, this is the food, this is the cost, here's how to use it, right? Which is commonly a missing link for a lot of people. Because, like, if I hear $30 chicken, I'm like, that's cool, because guess what? I can use that chicken for, like, multiple dishes throughout the week and learn how to, like, leverage that cost throughout. We do roast birds, we do whatever, we can do some confit, we can do a great soup, like, so there's an element of education there too.
Yeah. And the education piece is the part that, my husband is an educator. He's a professor at UVM. Almost all farming families around here have one person that farms and one person that, what we all joke, has the healthcare. Like, somebody has to have the steady job. And what I found is I myself didn't go to school to be a farmer. We have hired people that help us with growing the vegetables. We've learned an immense amount, and we do all the animal management and all the planning. But I'm on the other side of the food media, where when I'm traveling all over the country and I'm talking about food, of all the things I've ever done in food, trying to produce it is by far the most difficult.
100%.
And to try to educate and to say, yes, this chicken, I know that you think you just say this is an expensive chicken. When you taste it, people will go, what did you do to this?
Yeah.
And say, nothing. That's the whole point. And you can taste it at every part of it. So, I'm constantly making broth. I'm constantly using all these bits and pieces. There is nothing that goes to waste. And I even pick the bird's post and all the collagen and feed it to our dogs. Like, it goes, and I make the collagen. I have a 15-year-old dog that now won't. If you put dry kibble down, he's like, yeah, no. Where's the livers? And there's literally no piece of it that goes unused. And when Matt was reading my bio, I joke that I'm a dumpster cook, but I'm like, I can make something out of basically nothing.
Yeah.
And I know that, chefs more than anybody know how to do that. I was out in Napa last week, and there was a chef at a winery, which has been very interesting to see how many Michelin star chefs are moving into working these daytime winery chef gigs.
Mm-hmm.
he had some sort of interesting tweel. I was like, your tweel game's on point. Of something that would have been wasted that they were then dehydrating and putting into beautiful molds and making it to, something beautiful, something with crunch, something with, and it being just a complete part of it. And it was just a good reminder that so much of what we just throw away,
is usable.
It's so usable. And so, yes, it's $30 for that chicken, but if you
can use it five ways,
then
right.
You take the feet and you're making, you're not buying collagen peptides in a container, I mean, there's so much more there, and it does take more knowledge. And yes, it might take the tiniest bit more effort. And I think that's the part that we, more than anything, have to balance with. I get it. I'm tired. My kids are little. But sometimes you just have to do a little bit more.
Yeah.
So do you have any suggestions for chefs or restaurateurs or food businesses who really want to support small farms, but who might struggle with that bottom line and being able to afford it? How can we create partnerships to make it work for everybody?
Yeah, it's a great question, because I think there are, and I know it depends across the country where this is, but there are even food hubs that are in Vermont now, where small farms can then say, hey, we're going to sell all through this one supplier, which makes it easier for chefs to be able to say, hey, I just need to get like 1, 2, 3 deliveries, not 10.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah.
So that's been a really big help. There are 2 here. One's called the Acorn Network. The other's called Myers, which allow for essentially you to have almost the U.S. foods list, but that come from small farms. So that's really helpful. I think if you can just identify that, hey, 10% of the produce, the meat, whatever our dry goods, however you want to say it, we're going to make that little bit of extra effort to work with these 3 small farms, and maybe you rotate it. That helps. Every little bit helps. And being communicative and saying, hey, I need you to, the farm to be able to deliver on a different day. Like most farms are just everybody's trying to maximize their time. But half the time we would say, hey, we'll basically deliver any day.
Yeah.
That's okay. And just keeping that communication open. We have one chef who she does not exist on deadlines or on it. And it was fine because she'd say, hey, I'll pick it up. I'm driving by on this day. Can you just have it in the back? And we'd say, yep, no problem. So I know it's a little more effort. I know it's easier just to say, hey, I can get all these things from this one place. But if you could just say 10% of what we get, we're going to do a little bit more. We're going to take a little more time and work with, say, 2 or 3 farms.
Yeah. And I think bringing the staff in too, like for me and my restaurants, the more time that we spend and the energy that we spend in educating our team about why that stuff was important, there's that cascade effect to the guest. And so, without kind of being preachy farm to table-y, there's a real kind of conversation to be had about the relationships that you develop as a business and why. And I think that stuff is a great first approach too. Choose a couple of vendors or farmers that you like what they're doing, you want to support them, start small. And as those products come in through your back door, like gather the team, have the conversations, talk about why you're doing that, right? Like, I think the onus on the educational part is certainly on the farmer, but even as much, if not more, on the chef.
Yeah. And in a lot of ways, a lot of things fall on chefs. But in the same way that if you have a sommelier who is trying to pair wine and you bring in the staff and you taste through the wines with the food, you can do the same thing. We call, Carolyn knows this. We do side-by-sides in the test
So
kitchen.
many side-by-sides. Oh my goodness.
So
Yes.
do that with your staff.
Yeah.
And say, pick up this pepper and pick up this pepper, and you don't know which one is which. Let's talk about flavor. Let's talk about why. And you can do it with chicken. You can do it with chicken, and meat is particularly interesting because you get a whole different level of texture and flavor and all of that. But you do it with vegetables too. But when I used to sell wine, half of the time I was selling a wine because I knew I liked the winemaker.
Yeah.
I knew that this was the only American woman making Bordeaux, and she happens to sell here. Or what Ariana Acquipinti has been doing in Italy for a very long time. And those stories come through in the wine world. They come through when we talk about restaurants and best new chefs and why this person doing this. The farming stories aren't always there. There's been this divide of who people think farmers are. And the way that farming has gone in this country, now that I own a small farm, I 100% understand why people monocrop. I 100% understand why they favor safety over flavor. Because that your margins are so small, and the only way to actually make a profit off of it is to spray chemicals and up that yield and try to, do as much as you possibly can in order to balance out the price changes and everything. What we do is not financially stable yet. Every year we lose less money.
Yeah.
I know everybody understands that in the restaurant industry because of all the infrastructure that has to go into it. But it's the buy-in of it too, where every year people have said, you are part of my drive. Mm-hmm. And we see your baby cows and we name them and, we love feeding your chickens, and they'll come in and they'll buy a pack of ground beef.
Yeah. Yeah. I think as a chef too, it's also leaving yourself open, kind of broaden your horizons. Typically, in my experience, there's been many situations where farms will get to the end of the season and they'll be like, okay, we have so much kale right now that we just have to push out. Like, does anybody want? And so you make yourself adaptable to that. And you say, okay, cool. Well, let's think about this. What can I do with kale on a menu, that I haven't done, or something different? And it's relationship. I think it's just managing that relationship and making sure that you're open to new ideas too.
Yeah.
I'd love to shift a little bit to food media with you. You are somebody who is really uniquely positioned because of your work in food media and being a chef and being a farmer. How do you tell the story of, I guess, that, but mostly kind of sustainability in a way that's really relatable? I think, there is so many buzzwords out there in the world right now that drive me insane. I know they probably drive you crazy too, but there is importance in grabbing people's attention. And I feel like that's kind of a tough balance to strike. How do you do that?
Yeah. Well, there was always the joke of how many creamy chicken recipes can we write? Because everybody wants creamy chicken in a crock pot, pasta. When you look at, how many
chicken congee.
Yeah. How many times can we redo this same concept over and over and over again? And, when you think about menus, it's kind of the same thing. And Matt and you and I have talked about this so many times. There has to be a burger on the menu. There has to be chicken salad. There has to be something that people consistently, it doesn't matter how many times you're like, I could eat that again. Like, I can eat sushi every night for the rest of my life. I could eat, I'm just, I can. And everybody has that in some capacity. So it's that balance of give the people what they want, but also show them other things on that same menu. So, when we're looking at the 25 recipes that go into food and wine, it's always, do we have enough quick hit dinners? Is there enough chicken? Is there enough pasta? All right. Are we also then getting to do like 5 recipes that push boundaries with ingredients that people might not have heard of? And then the middle ground of there needs to be some baked goods too that are seasonal. And I, more than anything, and goodness, do I get made fun of about this, I push seasonality. Because people are like, well, you can get this all year round. I'm like, yes, you can. But where is it coming from? And if we can push and say, all right, not just it's turnip time. We're doing some turnip recipes. Like, it's ramp time. We don't have to do all, we'll test with green onions and we'll test with spring onions too, but we need some ramp recipes and we need to talk about what they are and how you harvest them. So I think that balance of always giving people what they want, and saying, yeah, you can always use frozen peas. However, fresh peas are magical.
Oh, the best.
They're the best. Like,
the best.
Yeah.
And then going that much further and saying there are many different varieties, and not just talking about snap peas and, one type of shelling pea. Let's go to the next two and talk about, we made this 3-pea pasta, cacio e pepe mac and cheese. It's like, it's an accessible thing that people get, but also with an ingredient that might push the boundary a little bit more.
Yep.
And I think a really good example of that, and I am putting a moratorium on these because I can't read the word Calabrian chili again. But is that same kind of thing. It's like nobody had heard of Calabrian chilies a few years ago in a regular grocery store. And now all of a sudden you see these prolific ingredients that are coming up and popping up all over the place. People now have a jar of them in their fridge. They want to know what to do with them. All right, so what's the next Calabrian chili? And moving from there. Yeah. So that balance in food media is hard though, and especially when we switch over to digital. And so when you go from print media to digital, print people are there, they're trying to get inspired. Digital, they're looking for something specific.
It's so funny too, like how ingredients and techniques like all kind of have their moments in the limelight. And it's funny too to watch from a chef's perspective, to watch like other chefs not really understand how to use those things to their advantage. Like I'm going on Food Network this week, and so I've been watching a bunch of reruns of the show that I'm doing, and just to kind of get inspired and get the juices flowing, and like watching chefs put like labneh with, whatever, like, Coca-Cola glazed something with like this spice, or like North African spices and, Mediterranean mash, like all these crazy different things. I'm like, no. Like, it's just so cringy. But so much of it is driven off of like the food media world in terms of like what's hip, what's hot, what can people relate to, and they don't think about it from a contextual point of view. They just think about it from that point of view, which is just really interesting to me. Anyways, I'm sure you see it all the time. That's a big world that you live in right now.
And there's also the balance of, I get pitched a lot of recipes from chefs, and it's always their PR agents, and they always identify this one thing that you're like, that's not, first of all, if you're pitching, remember that we work for 2 to 6 months out. So people that are pitching me Thanksgiving stuff, I'm like, you mean for next year? Contact me in 6 months. And so if, for any chefs working with PR, make sure your PR understands how food media cycle works.
So I was going to ask you, because I understand that, how do you deal with developing recipes with seasonal ingredients when you're working? We would sometimes be working 9 months ahead for print, right? Digital is more like, for ATK was more like 3 months, but 9 months, and you're trying to develop a peach pie, for example, but peaches are not in season, but you want to be using fresh peaches to show people how to make this peach pie.
Yeah. So we are same in that 9-month stint, and the peaches that come from the opposite side of the world at the other time, you're like putting them in a bag with a banana and then hoping they don't turn out mealy, all of those things. Yep. Ideally, we have, for the hyper seasonal recipes, we're testing a year out. That's become we're only testing especially those ingredients that there's really no substitute, or frozen doesn't work in the same way. Rhubarb, persimmons, ramps, they just, certain things, quince, that just don't have that balance, and really trying to do a year out. That's not always so. And sometimes, you just use your experience and frozen rhubarb is wet. Wet.
I'll never forget the first time that a cook that I worked with who was more senior than me got me to try an unripe Fuyu persimmon. And I had no idea. I'd never seen one before. And we were like going on the line, and it was they were going downstairs from the distributor to ripen or whatever. And he was like, "Oh, have you ever had a persimmon?" And I was like, "No." And he's like, "Oh, look how beautiful," because they're like beautiful, bright gold, and like, and I was like, he's like, "You eat it like an apple."
It was that hard.
And I was like, "Really? Okay, cool." Crunch, just like, like pucker. Yeah. So funny.
Yeah.
Stuck with me.
But honestly, it's kind of good to try things when they're unripe as well, in some capacity, because of what they do and how they gelatinize, because those persimmons go from like, that it's like a pear, that perfect pear.
Yep. And then they just go right downhill.
And then right downhill, you're like, now it's a mealy shit. You're just like, what? I waited. So that's hard, right?
Yeah.
But, chefs that want to work in media, and I'm always looking for chefs that are right on that balance of stay authentic to what you do well.
Totally.
Because there are some that really try to push that boundary, like you'll say, and go into this land where I'm like, I appreciate that you want to experiment here, but stay to who you are and the food is that you do. Because at the end of the day, we're not plate. We're not writing recipes for other chefs. We're writing recipes for home cooks.
Yeah.
It's so different.
We just dig in for a quick second? Because like you do a lot of work on cultural appropriation and what that means in food. I would love to get like kind of the down and dirty, 30 second to a minute, whatever it is, like kind of what are chefs doing wrong? What are chefs doing right?
Yeah.
And what are the best practices as it relates to that?
Yeah, that's, and especially over the past few years, really ever since the soup jumeau from Bonap that came out, that was just so completely different than what the original soup was. And more than anything was that the Haitian soup jumeau has a lot of cultural significance around Independence Day, and the soup that came out was just completely different. So more than anything, when I talk about recipe development, culturally appropriate recipe development, if you are Chinese, how do you write a Mexican recipe without being an asshole is really how you sum it up. And the biggest thing I tell people all the time is you do your homework. There are so many, when you are looking for that inspiration, you are getting it from somebody. So do your homework and give credit to where that came from. Of course,
cultural context
for the
dish. Yeah,
exactly. And describe it, and don't just use a country or a culture to quantify what it is.
What does that mean, cultural
Asian
context? How do you define cultural context?
Yeah.
Where does that dish, where did it originate? Where did it first come from?
Yeah.
How has it changed over the years? Where do you see it? How do people use it? What are the difference? I mean, of course, Breana, you can correct me or expand.
But like, how do you compact all? Because that's like, we could spend hours talking about that, right? And the best practices to be able to do that.
Yeah.
But you don't have that opportunity in a restaurant environment. So like, how do you contextualize that?
Oh, you're talking about a restaurant. Okay, so I'm thinking
that and cram that all into like a menu. You know what I mean?
So particularly when you name your dishes, you don't just use Asian, Thai, Korean. You don't just say whatever the culture is and then, unless it is a thing that is a known thing and you don't change from what that is. But just saying like Chinese chicken salad, that doesn't, there is no such thing. Like,
yeah.
Mandarin oranges in a can is not something that they grow, and slivered almonds and mayonnaise. Like that is not a thing. So when you're trying to, you only have, in a lot of ways, menus are a lot like working in print because you only have so many words to try to quote unquote sell somebody on your dish. If you can focus in on the ingredients and or potentially the technique used, put the word braised in there, or instead of saying Asian short ribs, say soy sauce and ginger braised short ribs. That gives cultural context without you just having to rely on whatever the name is or a stereotype or anything. You can
just lean into the ingredients more than anything.
Lean into the ingredients. And if you need to put something that is quote unquote the English translation, you put it in parentheses. So I remember eating, at a local restaurant, and they said there was a dish and it said rice congee. And I was like, it's like saying potato chip.
Right.
So, either give your reader more credit, educate the server so they can describe it, or, say
congee rice.
Yeah, congee, or, which is like stir with rice, and so people can know what it is. If it's not rice, let's say you do a farro congee.
Yeah.
Right? Delicious. Then congee is more used as the technique. Your ratio of water to whatever your grain is.
But then aren't we back to those days when chefs would like put things in quotation marks, which drove me insane, right? Like farro congee. Like, no.
If you italicize, it immediately means like this is a non-white thing. Or, putting, and we've even moved in food media land to not using words that are associated with mental health. So we don't say binge-worthy or addictive or crazy good. Like we don't even use those
Milk Bar. Do you remember when Milk Bar changed crack pie?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So, we don't use any of those words anymore. And I'm constantly talking to the nutrition community about this because especially the word clean. Because on the farm, when produce comes out of the ground, what is it?
Dirty.
Dirty.
Okay?
Very dirty. What does clean mean? And when people are like, these certain products are clean, I'm like, what does that mean? It's an empty marketing word. And it's one of my triggers because being on a farm, you're like, no, there is a thing that is dirty.
See, I like the word dirty better anyway.
It's chicken shit on your roof. We have the chicken shits everywhere. So that is dirty. Like that's the difference. And so when you're on your menu and, instead of relying on those easy words, use that as your chance to educate. And if you can put a few more words in there, if you need to put whatever the chicken word is, which is something that, people know and can glom onto. If there is a word here or there that they don't know, that's okay. It really is, So to be able to put that there, and that helps farms too, because then we've gone down to just, somebody did this study recently of how many crops we actually grow versus how many we could. And it's very few. There's only 2 types of kale out there. No. 3 types. There's red, there's curly, there's red, and lacinato. Like there are many, many, many other different types of kale. So and that's really important for sustainability. And it's really important for our soil because each type of vegetable utilizes a different nutrient and replaces a different nutrient. So when you are talking about, that going back to that regenerative ag, the less we can monocrop, the less that I can say, oh, nope, we're only growing these 5 things and doing these 5 things well. It's terrible for our soil.
Who is the one person that you've hired that has transformed your business?
So we had one farmer who came in this summer, Matt, or Mar.
Yep.
We went from being a semi-productive farm to on the map. And she did that for us in a way that no one had ever shown us. And she has that equal sense of all over the the placeness.
All over the placeness.
Yeah. Where, people are always like, how do you get everything done? I'm like, well, I'm almost always doing 2, if not 3 things at the same time. Always got, when I'm working from home, I've always got a load of laundry going. I've always got, multiple things happening because
children running around.
There's children running around. There's only so much time in the day.
Right.
So she showed us what our farm could be and help us. She was the one that said, you guys should really focus on growing these things. And you should, we're thinking about switching a couple of our beds next year into, just for chickens, actually, and ramping up our bird production because that local meat thing is a big deal. And
it's really cool.
It's, we are on such a public corner. Our farm stand does very, very well. So
packed.
Yeah, and if, my hopes and dreams.
You need more parking.
Oh my gosh. It's everybody complains about something always. Everybody that's worked in hospitality knows you can't make everybody happy. But we do make a lot of people happy. And we are a part of a lot of we live on a corner. We literally call it Killeen Crossroads because we are at a place where people have to actually stop. And
are you in Burlington?
We're in Shelburne, so we're just south.
Okay.
And we're really actually just over the line of South Burlington. So, but we're 8 minutes from the airport.
Awesome.
So
I'm going to tell my old executive editor lives in Burlington, and I love her very much. And I'll tell her to stop by or.
Yeah, we're closed for the season, but if she drives at any point this way, she would know the farm.
Cool.
Yeah.
Carolyn, which one are we on?
Marketing. What's been the most successful marketing decision you've made for your business?
Starting to work for Food and Wine. And we have this conversation all the time. My husband and I, he's like, you are a big part of the brand. People know the farm because I'm traveling all over the country and talking about, Vermont farms. And social media is a big thing, of course, but it's such a beast to be constantly feeding. Yeah. So basically, yes, you need a website. Yes, you need an Instagram site. You need all those things. But attaching my name with a large brand, invaluable.
Yep.
Yeah. We've heard that from a lot of chefs who have done Top Chef.
Yes.
Yeah.
The last one is technically on software, but it can be anything. What is the one tool that you use every day?
Do you want it to be software? Because
no, it doesn't have to be.
It's Airtable.
Airtable. Oh, yeah.
Airtable is my life. I'm a Virgo type A. I like my shit neat. My
kind of woman.
Yeah, I tore some tape today because Abram had moved my, and I was just trying to get this stock I use a lot of super cubes. And I couldn't find my tape dispenser and I had to tear it. And I thought of you, Matt, and I was like, fuck.
Worst. That's going to stay with you all day.
Yeah. And I'll have to go back and see it in the freezer torn.
Cut your tape, everyone. Cut your tape.
Yeah. Airtable is truly the kind of system that it's color coded. You can create your own views because we all think differently, which I think is really important. And that I use for work every single day, and I wish I could use it for my life. It would help organize things even better at a time when I can't remember anything.